Welcome to the Third and Central podcast, the only podcast dedicated solely to the University of Louisville baseball program. This is Matt Sefcovic, and as always, I'm joined by Terry Pennington this evening after the Cards stayed hot, winning 3 of their last 4 with a big series win over North Carolina, which we're going to recap here in a few minutes. But Terry, as sports fans, we talk about this on the podcast from time to time, kind of my favorite times of the year, just being just general sports fans. And we're kind of entering that stage right now where, conference play is starting in college baseball, which obviously that's our thing. We love college baseball, especially here in Louisville. The NCAA tournament is ramping up this weekend. When those two things collide, it's really difficult not to become an extension of your couch and just sit there for days at a time and just flip back and forth. We've actually moved our second TV out into our living room for the weekend because we're ready to go. We'll probably have Spider-Man on one of them part of the weekend for my son, but going back between Spider-Man basketball and baseball. But this part of the year, to me as a sports fan, just doesn't get any better. And I know you probably feel the exact same way.
Yeah, it's just so fun. You even have Major League Baseball ramping up. If you happen to like, if you're an NBA guy or an NHL guy, you're kind of winding down with playoff races and, like you said, NCAA tournament, college baseballs, we're in conference play. I mean, it's tough to not just sit there and rot on your couch just night after night after night and just, like you said, just essentially become a growth spot right on there.
One thing I do, I'll mention this. I always have a glass of bourbon when we record our podcast, and I always gauge what I'm drinking based off how we're playing at the time. And tonight I poured a glass of Blanton's, so if that gives any indication of how Louisville's playing. I took that off the top shelf because Louisville is 17-3. They're playing top shelf baseball right now, so that's where I went. 17-3, 2-1 in the ACC after the big weekend win over North Carolina, who came into the weekend ranked number 6 in the country. After that series win, Louisville's catapulted. They're pretty much ranked in every poll at this point in time. They have 4 quad 1 wins early in the season, which is pretty impressive. The most in the country right now is 6. Clemson has 6 of them. There's a couple teams with 5, and then Louisville sits there at 4. So they're kind of at the upper end of the list of teams with quad 1 wins this early in the season. Right now, we look at the rankings. The highest rankings of Baseball America at 15. D1 Baseball, that's kind of my favorite. They're at 16. The USA Today Coaches Poll, they're at 20. And Perfect Game, they round out at 22. I think they're very deserving of every spot that they are right now. I think 22 is probably a little too low. I think probably the 15 to 16 range, I think, is probably where I'd be if you look at the rankings and the teams around them. But I think most importantly, it's indicative of how Louisville's playing right now this season. 20 games in, you're 17-3. Couldn't ask for a better start. And I just really love the direction of where this season is going right now in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the rankings go, I'm with you. I'm more of a D1 guy, just in terms of like that's just the ranking I do, associate with, okay, we're this, and I know in the athletic department they kind of pick the best one, and they'll pick the best one for the opponent also, so it kind of looks a certain way, and that's fine, especially if they do it that way, so that's all good. But I pay a lot of attention. I know you're an RPI guy for sure. I know you've probably been excited, definitely, to early in the season, especially this last weekend, to watch them just kind of rocket up the RPI rankings with some good wins, just playing a better opponent. I'm an ELO guy. I think I've said that maybe before early on the podcast. So I think that's a very good indicator of date. It does update, minute by minute if there's games finishing or whatever. But I think there were 16 coming into today, in the ELO. So yeah, right in that, kind of that space that, you're kind of thinking of 15, 16, I think is it the Massey ratings? I think they were 19th. So again, that's just another computer ranking that I do kind of like to pay attention to, but yeah, I mean, they're, right in that 15 to 20 range, somewhere right in there is probably right. And Just based on the way the last couple seasons went, I think people who were doing some of these polls just kind of wanted Louisville to prove it to them before they put them in there. Even after a really good opening weekend down in Texas, I think they just wanted to see it done one more weekend against a quality opponent. And that's why you saw after a couple real nice wins against North Carolina, you jump from not in the rankings, you jump up 10 spots, 9, 10 spots in these polls in a lot of them. And I think that's probably right now. And there's as you kind of start to look down the schedule, there's an opportunity here in this next month or so to really continue to, build and stack some W's. I think if they can continue to play the way that they, have played, especially pitching and defense wise, to continue to, move themselves up these rankings. And, who knows? I mean, you get to you might find yourself in the middle of April dreaming of, June baseball at Jim Patterson Stadium again. Could be pretty awesome.
Man, I'd love to see that again. I think those are some of my best memories as a Louisville baseball fan. Just the hosting regionals and hosting super regionals, and the games that you cherish were one to Omaha, but also the couple that didn't go our way. But just being there and being able to experience that quality level of baseball is it's something that I'm excited about, and I hope that that's an opportunity we get to have again this summer at Jim Patterson Stadium. And a couple things I want to touch on. You talked about the pollsters wanting to see something from Louisville and kind of what they were going to be this year before they really gave them their mark of approval, putting in the top 25. I think we may have saw that a little bit from the fans too. But if you look at the attendance from this weekend, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, the attendance this weekend in the North Carolina, all 3 games, and Friday was a doubleheader, during the day, and then the late game on Friday, the late afternoon game on Friday. The fans had to stay around a long time if you're going to watch 2 baseball games. But attendance was right above or right below 2,000 each of those games, which that's a big uptick from what we've seen so far this season. And that's our first ticketed games of the year. So not only were they coming, but they were paying to be there. So I think fans have seen that, hey, this team's, they're pretty good this year. We're going to come out and support them. So I think the fans are hungry. And I think if this team continues to play the quality baseball they've been playing, those numbers are just going to continue to increase as this schedule goes on. And then you talked about, look into the schedule, and you hate to look at a schedule and start counting or wins or counting losses here or there. Obviously we can do that on this side. The players and coaches, they don't have this luxury to do that or talk about it out loud. But, you at the end of our conference schedule, you've got Clemson, Florida State, and Wake Forest. Those are all 3 of those series, which are probably our toughest series remaining. If you look at the schedule, they're all at the back half of the schedule. So if you can, you really want to start stacking some wins here. I think Louisville has a really big opportunity right now in the next month or so to really stack some wins, build some confidence. So when those more challenging or higher ranked opponents in conference, those series come up, we've got that confidence built up because we don't have to face them early on in the season. So I think that is something that I'm looking forward to, and I think is hopefully going to play to our advantage as the season progresses.
Yeah, exactly like you said. When you do look at it and you run it down, even the midweeks will start to get a little tougher here. There's not any, at least for the next couple weeks, no directional schools or anything like that in there to that you might look at and think is a W. Even when we do put in, Western in there in a few weeks, obviously is playing great baseball. You get Cincinnati, you get UK a couple times. Indiana. So a lot of good challenges in the midweeks coming that, again, to just opportunities to continue to build that resume. Couple road games, obviously. Cincinnati's on the road, Indiana on the road, one of the UK. So just a lot of opportunities for this baseball team to continue to build their resume. It's not really something I concern myself with or worry about, especially at this point in the season. But when you do take a look at the schedule and the way they've played baseball so far, if they can continue to do the things that they've been doing, playing relatively clean baseball defensively, and the pitching has been absolutely outstanding. And is it, you know, it's going to be a little tougher, obviously, in the midweeks than it has been in the past few. But, I mean, this team has done nothing so far to show you that, you know, there's games on their schedule that they're not going to win or be competitive in.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we saw this weekend against North Carolina. So let's go ahead and run that down because it was a big win, kind of tone setter for conference play. Played a doubleheader on Friday, like I had mentioned. You talked about last week, just because of the weather that was coming in on Saturday. Game 1, Louisville won 8-7. Kind of got the scoring started early. Lucas Moore scored on a balk, which was weird because North Carolina, I think, had 2 in the game, which, you know, you can go a couple months in college baseball and not see a balk, and to see 2 called in the one game, it was kind of funny. It was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 2 different pitchers, but they did a very similar thing, just kind of slipped off the mound. But Lucas Moore, so he scored on the balk to kind of get the scoring started for Louisville, and then Zion Rose hit a bomb in that game. I think what was one of the most exciting things to me in that game was the way he responded when he hit the home run. You know, Zion is a pretty reserved guy. He's been on here a couple of times. You know, he doesn't show a ton of emotion, but man, from home plate to first base, he was jacked up. You know, kind of tosses his bat a little bit, jumping up and down, screaming at the dugout. It was really good to see Zion showing that kind of emotion after obliterating a baseball like he did. And then UNC was able to get the cuts a little bit after Forbes came out. They took a 7-3 lead. And then, man, Jake Monroe just continues to do what Jake Monroe does. Hit a grand slam, sent a ball out to the left field berm to tie the game back at 7. And then Louisville took the lead on a error, and in the I believe it was the 5th inning, and then there was no run scored from the 6th through the 9th. So pretty quiet later third of the game. You and I've talked about often Ethan Eberle picked up a win. Just freshman. We talked about the freshman quite a bit, and just he's just going out and pumping the zone. 3 innings, 1 hit, and then turned things over to Tucker Biven, who another one we talked about last week. You know, Tucker had a couple outings to start the season that probably didn't go the way he wanted them to go, but Tucker came out this weekend and he did what Tucker does. Closed the door on North Carolina to pick up the first win, which really was the big one. You know, if you can win that first one, then all you got to do is win one of the next 2. And being able to come in and close the door like he did was big. And I think we learned a lot about Louisville in that game. You know, they took a lead, then they lost it. A full run lead, lost a big lead, and were able to come back and not only tie it back up, but win the baseball game. So I thought they showed us a different way that they can win a baseball game, and that was something that I was excited about.
Yeah, you know, the thing about, if I can just jump back to Zion for a minute, because the thing about Zion that is always really interesting to me, getting to talk to some of these guys after games, is he's so professional in the way that he answers questions, just the way he acts in general, just because he's been so good and so highly touted for so long. He has so much more training. He's had so many more opportunities to do interviews, to do things like that. I love asking him questions because he will sit there and like think about, he wants to come up with a good answer. And so he'll like kind of pause for a second, think of what he wants to say, and he'll come out with a really good professional answer. And you're right, he's a pretty reserved guy, just in terms of emotions and things like that. But yeah, man, that turn to the dugout, screaming at him, yeah, you know, toss the bat. You know, he had done that earlier in the year, where he hit just a moonshot out there to left, where he like, you know, kind of backed up out of the batter's box and tossed the bat up. I mean, I love that stuff. I mean, I'm here for all of it. I want more of it. I don't know if Coach Mack thinks that's the best way to go about doing things, but if it's maybe not quite as professional or anything, but that's college baseball to me. And I loved it. I loved seeing it from him because, you know, like, Zion's really hard on himself, and he's maybe not had, you know, quite the last 2 weeks that he, you know, has wanted, or, you know, what his expectations are for himself. But, you know, like, he felt like finally, like, like just let's let some emotion out, let's get it out. And like, man, you're right, that ball was crushed. And then Jake Monroe, I mean, what more can you say about this guy? I mean, I'm running out of ways to describe him. He just keeps hitting. And, if I don't think when he comes up, you're thinking grand slam necessarily. I mean, you think it'd be nice for sure, but man, get it all back in one swing was huge. And like you said, Ethan Eberle, man, that dude, I mean, I tried to talk to him after the game. He was unavailable because he was not feeling very well. So just like the idea that he had done so well while not feeling well, I mean, that kid came in and was just lights out and has really been that way almost every time they've given him the ball so far. So just, before the season started, I think, we had talked about, I thought there was probably 10 innings that we would need a week from freshman arms. And man, it has been very few and far between that, Dan's run a guy out there that just, that it hasn't gone well. And so he's pushing all the right buttons. The kids are dialed in. And it's a special group of arms, those freshman arms. I mean, even Peter Michael shared with it on Sunday after the game. He's talked about a couple different times about just the mentorship with the young guys, how talented those kids are. And again, Bivin, yeah, I mean, we mentioned it last week. No one's worried about if Tucker doesn't have his A game, a time or two when he goes out there. Kid's a bulldog. He's able to just, rinse it out and let's go again. And again, though, much like Zion with the emotion, you saw how much it meant to him to get that save right there. And let's get back on track. A couple good fist pumps as he covers first base and gets that final out. So it was a huge win, man. Just like you said, I thought it was coming into the day, knowing that you don't have Detmer starting, just the idea that you could win that first game and maybe take some pressure off Jack Brown to not, just feel like he has to do everything and just go be yourself. And I thought that was a big moment in the day.
I think one big thing you talked about was the mentorship. And that is something I heard somebody talking about this in college basketball the other day, heading into the tournament with, you've got guys on these rosters now that are, 23, 24 years old because they can do that. They can stay around in college for a longer period now. So when you've got those guys with that kind of experience, they just approach the game at a completely different angle than an 18-year-old does. So when you've got those guys behind you in the bullpen and it's coming from a player as opposed to a coach, I think you receive it a little bit differently at times. So just having the ability to be an 18-year-old and have somebody like a Peter Michael or, Eddie King Jr. has been around for a long time, or a Kamayu Neighbors who's done this for a while, I think that really goes a long way. And Coach Mack always talks about, just how he's building his roster now and how he's approaching that. I think this, the program guys and then blended in with some freshmen and some transfers, it appears that what they've done, they've kind of figured out their recipe for success. And I think that's a really big component. That's a really good point that you bring up, because you've got 18-year-olds that we're heavily relying on this year. I mean, we've got a bunch of freshmen that we're rolling out every single game. And when you've got that steady, mental mentor that can kind of help you adjust to the college baseball game, I think that is a major, major advantage that we have right now. And I think that's paying off with the bullpen.
I think even, just even a step further beyond what you're saying, with young coaches or volunteer assistants like Cam Robinson down there to help those guys, just Dylan Hoy, some guys like that just are fresher out of the game, younger guys, a little bit more their age, might have a little bit, they might feel a little bit more comfortable talking to those guys, or just sharing experiences. It doesn't have to be some, big presentation about do this or do this. Just, hey, I've been there. You're okay. If maybe you've heard something from, one of the coaches and you're not quite gathering what they're saying and you need to explain to you a different way, or, you just need a guy to put an arm around you and say, hey, it's all right, man. I've been there. It's not the end of the world. You're going to get another opportunity. And that has been kind of one of the things I've really enjoyed from some of these freshman arms is, maybe when it didn't go great the first time or so out, they've come right back and they've learned from what has happened. So whether that's just those guys, progressing, which I'm sure is obviously a large part of it, but, the mentorship, all those things, it's all encompassing, and it all kind of adds up to what we've seen so far.
And I think that's a good way to kind of segue into the second game from Friday. We're talking about Jack Brown a little bit, freshman. He's starting a game against North Carolina, number 6 team in the country. You come out in the first inning, give up 3 runs. That's not where you're wanting to go, right? That's not the direction you think your big start, your first big start of your career is going to go. But instead of just kind of rolling over, like, he came out and threw 2 more clean innings, and I think I was excited to see that out of Jack, and I was hoping that's what we were going to see, and that's how he responded. He battled back. He didn't just roll over and say, "Hey, we're down 3-0 in the first. This is it. Turn this thing over to the bullpen." He threw 2 more innings to preserve as many arms down there that he could, and just battled back to try to give Louisville 2 more innings to try to get the bats going offensively. But man, Jake Knapp in the other dugout was. He was good. He was that dude on Friday afternoon. I think Louisville only got 7 hits on 4 innings against him, 4 hits in 7 innings against him. He was just pumping the zone. He was nearly unhittable. But Louisville ended up, scoring a couple in the 8th, but ended up losing the game 6-4. They were still competitive. After getting down early, I was glad to see that they didn't fight. We've talked about that quite a bit. Just continue to battle and chip away. But when you're playing another, top 10, top 15 team, wherever you want to call them now, you're going to have to just tip your hat sometimes and take the loss. So it was good to see Jack battle back the way that he did, and that they continued to fight. But it was North Carolina's day. That's just what it was. You tip your hat and you move on.
Yeah, he, exactly like you. I'm sure there was some pretty good nerves that he had rolling out for first start in an ACC game, and obviously, against a really good opponent who had they knew they needed to win that game after dropping the first one, and they came out in the top half of that first inning swinging like they knew they had to win that game, and they hit the ball pretty hard. I think they put 3 on the board right away. But just like you, man, just the battle, man. Keep the bulldog. Just stick with it. It's easy to pitch when you're in the zone, when you're rolling, you got a good flow, and you can just get the ball, check what it is, and go. Because you're in the zone. But to be able to continue to battle when you don't have your best stuff, that showed me all I need to know about Jack Brown that day. And like you said, kept us right in the game. They weren't clean innings, I don't think, the second and the third, but he kept you right in it. And, just down 3-0, you're right in the game. Just weren't able to just scratch out the hits, like you said. Tip your hat to Carolina. They had our number in game number 2 there for sure, especially on the mound. And yeah, we did rally back. I think we got the tying run to the plate, for a couple different hitters there in the 9th inning, but wasn't meant to be. But yeah, the way that we've talked about, and they've come back and finished off a couple of rallies for earlier in the season, a few different times. I think we talked last time about that. Just three different pretty amazing comebacks so far this season. But this team doesn't quit, and even though they were not able to complete it for a win, same mentality, same idea, and even against a top 10 opponent, stayed right in it, right to the very last out.
Yeah, it was a really competitive series. I was really just excited, like you said, just to see Jack just fight the way that he did, and just kind of give Louisville an opportunity to get back into it. They didn't. That's okay. Like you said, tip your hat to them and roll on to Sunday, which is where we stood. And man, Sunday was just a really, really, really good college baseball game. I still don't think I have any nails left from that game, because the whole time I was sitting there just so nervous. And really for Peter Michael, who we've talked about time and time again, we may have to sponsor him on this podcast if we keep talking about him like this. But man, what a pitcher's duel that was on Sunday, and what a game that he threw. And neither one of those pitchers deserved to take a loss. Fortunately, Louisville ended up winning 5-0. It probably looks a little more inflated than what it was, because when they scored 5 runs, at that point in time, it felt like it was 15. Like it was like, we've got a couple run lead, but UNC's not coming back. Like we've got the dudes on the mound today. Michael ended up throwing 6 1/3. He only gave up 1 hit, struck out 7. And what's most impressive about that is he walked 6 that day. If take those take the 6 walks away, and I mean you're probably looking at an 8-inning game for Michael if he can end up going that long. So, to take those pitches off his arm, because he got into the 90s, I believe. So, but man, he was unhittable Sunday afternoon. He had his good stuff going that day. Really, really impressive. And I don't think they picked up their first hit until, was it the 7th inning when they got their first hit down the left field line. And then we've talked about him before, but Daniel Levitch came in and was just impressive again. And then Tucker Biven, for the second time of the weekend, came in and got the final 3 outs to end the game. Just what a pitcher's duel it was. Just a really fun game. If you like, pitching, if you're an offensive guy, it probably wasn't your game to be at. When we go to games like that, my wife is like, okay, can we go home? And me, I love those types of games. That's what I'm there for. So, the home runs are fun. Those are always good games too. But when you talk about, being a baseball purist, I think those are the games that I live for and that I would prefer to be at. So, heck of a game from Michael, and just the pitching in general to win the series and take that game on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there were two of the 3 games, and they do happen to be the 2 games that we won, but I thought were amazingly good college baseball games. I thought the first game on Friday, just, kind of back and forth, and, just there was a couple, obviously, dramatic homers there with, Zion's, huge blast and getting pumped up, and then, obviously, Jake with the grand slam, and, there are just some quirky, weird things, like you said, the couple weird balks, and, but that game was the polar opposite of the game on Sunday, which I'm not looking at my box score right now, but I think it was like 2 hours and 24 minutes, something like that. And so, I mean, that game was flying, and just a classic pitcher's duel. Look, you don't see many of those on Sundays in college baseball. Those tend to be, not quite like a Tuesday game, but those tend to be a little higher scoring sometimes. But both guys had, I don't want to say their A stuff, because to be honest, I think Michael would tell you, he really didn't feel like he had that great of stuff, to be honest. But he doesn't seem to get rattled with guys on base. And that was the key to the day, because, yeah, he did have 6 walks. But he just kept getting himself in and out of trouble. And, not every day. You aren't going to have your best stuff every day. And so I thought that was... if you want to compare that to what he had the week before, where he, I think, was in the zone 67% of the time, he wasn't that this time. And so, but to still be able to battle, like I said, in and out of trouble, you get the lead. And yeah, I mean, when they, get those add-on insurance runs there late in the game, yeah, like you said, I mean, those were worth 2 or 3, it seemed like at the time, just the way we were, the way the pitching staff was rolling. So yeah, again, Wyatt, I mean, this bullpen, man, I mean, it almost doesn't seem to matter who you throw out there. There are clearly guys that are starting to establish roles. So whether it's, Dan had even talked this past weekend about the need to have more than one closer in college baseball. And I think he feels very comfortable with either one of those 2 guys tossing them out there. But if the series works out that way, where, you get to run Wyatt out in the 8th or, 7th inning, then you get to back him up with Tucker Biven, good luck. More than likely, that's going to end up in your favor. And so that's exactly the way it ended again. And, I mean, a huge series win. Just, not just because North Carolina is, at the time is a top 10 team or anything like that, but just to get off with a series win to open the ACC schedule up, especially, at home. You'd like to win those series at home. Going on the road this week. And so just to get it off on a positive note, continue to win series, man, huge for the boys. And, like I said earlier, I think we've talked about, just allows you to kind of, think, maybe this team is different, which I think we already knew. But I think some others around the country are starting to realize, like, maybe Louisville's back here a little bit. And so I think people are starting to pay a little bit more attention around the country a little bit.
Yeah, I think you'll probably, you start seeing some of the guys play with a little bit more swagger. They're going to have more confidence as they continue to stack some wins, or if they're able to continue to stack some wins. And, I think they've come into the season, they talked about it quite a bit, with a chip on their shoulder, just the way the past few years have gone. So I think you're starting to see that. And it's starting to play out between the lines. One thing you mentioned was, having Danielevich and Bivin back-to-back in the bullpen. I was looking at with 2 games on Friday, then off on Saturday, and then playing again on Sunday. I was kind of going through the scenarios in my head, and I'm like, there's probably a really good chance that we go Michael, Danielevich, Bivin. Like that's kind of the progression that I was thinking, because when you got that day off in between, really, your bullpen guys are available, right? The ones, even if they threw on Friday, if they threw an inning or two, they're going to be available with a day's rest. So I think it was kind of best case scenario, and having Peter Michael on a Sunday, and you alluded to, Sunday games are typically your high scoring games. That's just the nature of it. They're typically not your best arms. That's just how it is. But there's, there's not much of a drop off between, what our progression is for our weekend from Friday to Sunday this year, with Peter Michael kind of holding down that Sunday spot. And if he continues to be able to do what he's doing, man, this is a team that's they've got the makeup to have a special season and make a run this postseason.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned earlier, maybe we should sponsor, we might have to sponsor. I mean, he might sponsor us. I don't know, just the way that we give him love on here. He might have to turn around and throw it back our way. But he's been so good on Sundays. When you're able to, it's funny just when you compare and contrast the way that he pitches on Sunday and the way that he goes about it and what his repertoire looks like versus what Forbes does on a Friday. And they're completely different types of pitchers. I think Forbes was up at 100 on Friday.
Yep.
In the first inning, had another one for sure at 99. So, and he was, as electric as he can get those first 3 innings on Friday. And the control abandoned him a little bit in the 4th inning, and that'll happen from time to time. But obviously, just the comparing between the two guys and the way that they pitch and go about it just shows you, like, there's not one way to get it done, and each guy has their own. Each pitcher, it doesn't matter if you're a starter or you're a reliever, or even just the mentality. When you look at a guy like. Even just take like Bivin closing, from Forbes to Michael to Bivin, those are 3 dudes that throw completely different, have completely different repertoires of pitches. They'll have completely different like mental makeups in the way they approach pitching. And yet all 3 have their own way to get the job done and be successful. And so I think that's one of the things I think is really cool about baseball. It's like you can all 3 have the same job and go about doing it differently and still come out and be successful. It's pretty neat to me.
It's funny you bring that up, because I was watching Louisville's game last night against Northern Kentucky, but I was kind of following along because there were some big upsets last night across the country. ETSU beat Tennessee, which is a game I'm going to talk about just for a second. It was later in the inning, or later in the game. I don't remember which inning it was at this point in time, but ETSU either had the lead or it was tied. It was a close game in the later innings, and they end up bringing in their Friday night starter to get a couple outs. And just like you said, just the way you approach the game as a starter to a middle reliever to a closer, it's completely different. And you see coaches do that a lot of times in the postseason when, you just need a couple outs right now or we're not going to win the baseball game and our season's over. So you want to get your best arm on the mound right now. And that's kind of where they were down in Knoxville last night. But that's hard to do. It's not easy to just walk out there in the 7th, 8th, 9th inning and pick up a couple outs when you're typically used to having, a couple hours and, you've got your pregame meal planned at this time and you've got your stretching at this time and you're on a very, very strict regimen and schedule. But it's kind of neat to see just how different coaches approach that differently and ended up working out because ETSU beat East Tennessee State beat Tennessee last night for a massive upset, the first loss for the Volunteers this season. But it's just kind of different, and it's neat how everybody approaches it differently, but kind of try to get the same exact results out of it in the end.
And I think, like, even when you think about just some different things that have happened through this year, like a couple different times when, Tucker has come into the game and it's not been a save situation. You see it happen, especially a lot in Major League Baseball. Closers have a really hard time when it's not all on the line, because I don't know if maybe you're not as amped up, you don't quite have the same focus, because I don't want to say you don't need it, but you're just not used to that type of situation where it's a little bit more stress-free. And so that's why, like, some of those outings don't really worry me, just because he hasn't been in, as some of the outings that maybe weren't his best outing were not save situations or anything like that. It's not like he was blowing a game or a save or something like that. So, again, with the game on the line, give Tucker the baseball, give Wyatt the baseball. Either way, I mean, give Tucker the baseball first and then give Wyatt the baseball. I don't know if they do or don't care which order they get it in, but it would seem that he's probably going to give it to Wyatt first and then give it to Tucker, at least as of now. And, it certainly worked this past weekend for sure.
Yeah, it was good to see. And like you said, Coach McDonald talking about the need for two options in college baseball. You're definitely seeing that become more of a common thing right now. And just having those multiple options down in the bullpen, it's going to pay dividends. And it's good to have two guys that are kind of lights out, that we can flip the ball to whenever we need a couple outs to get out of a game or get out of a jam. And it's going to be huge for this team going forward, having multiple options, because that's not always the case. Not just here, but other places. You see a guy that just gets way overused throughout the season because the bullpen just doesn't have many other options. And having too many options, we've talked about this before, that's a good thing. And I think that's going to be a reason why this team is going to continue to have success going forward, like they did against Northern on Tuesday night this week. It was a beatdown kind of from the beginning. I do want to touch on this, so I think it's one of my favorite games of the year. We talked earlier about the kind of the themed games that we have. We talked about the school day where the kids come out and their field trip is at the ballpark, and you talked about how much you enjoyed that one. I think the cancer one's a pretty cool one too. That's cancer is something that obviously has impacted everyone in one way or another, and they wear the the black and pink jerseys, and the players have the patches on their arms with the initials of family members or loved ones, and the different ribbons that symbolize different types of cancer. I think it's a pretty cool touch that the marketing department does very, very well. And that was on Tuesday night. But Louisville won the game 11-1 in just 7 innings. There was a run rule. They were just kind of all over them from the beginning, which I was kind of shocked. Obviously, I know Louisville's a good baseball team, but this isn't a bad Northern team either. They were 12-6 coming into the game. They'd won 6 in a row, so they were pretty hot. But Louisville obviously was the much better team on Tuesday and did what they had to do and got out of there early, took care of business. 10 hits, scored 11 runs, like I said. Alisea had a double, a triple. Zion, again, kind of talked about how he's hard on himself and kind of had a couple games that he wished he had done other things and had different results. Hit another bomb off the batter's eye and just to the left of center field. Saw 6 different pitchers in 7 innings. So just got to see a lot of the younger guys compile some innings and, build up their stats a little bit too. So it was just a good midweek win. Like you said, before we kind of transition into this series of midweeks, that there's not going to be many pushovers for the next 5 or 6 weeks in midweek. Not that Northern was. Like I said, they're a good baseball team. I think they got preseason votes to win the Horizon League. So, they're going to hold their own when they get into conference play. But just a good quality win that Louisville came in, took care of business like you'd hope they would against a team like Northern.
Yeah, I think Northern is definitely a team that, like you had mentioned, coming in, they were playing some good baseball. They can definitely really, at least over the course of the season up to this point, they can really swing the bat. I think that's exactly, kind of the type of team they were last year. I believe they were an NCAA tournament team last year. And so, a team that was coming in, probably feeling pretty good about themselves. They hung with us for a little bit last year too, I think, down at our place a little later in the year, I think. But, yeah, I mean, even right from the jump, I mean, TJ was really good. Was really excited for him to get his, get the start on the mound, and just even Coach Mack after the game talked about just it's a different approach for him to, throughout the day or, pre-game to just kind of get into a different rhythm of what does he need to do to get himself ready to go at a certain, a time that he knows he's going to start and things like that. So I thought that was really good for him, and he was really good. I mean, as essentially like an opener, got through 2 innings, and then, fun to watch some young local kids go out there. Always fun. Schweitzer gets in again. I think he's retired his last 7. Gregor comes in with a shutdown inning as well. So again, like I said, some local kids get out on the mound and do their thing. And then, yeah, I mean, as far as the hitting goes, yeah, I mean, you've mentioned it and we've talked about it. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before, but he is very hard on himself. And after the game and the post game, he was mentioning, yeah, I've been scuffling a little bit, I haven't really I literally was looking at my box score while talking to him, and I'm like, I even said right back to him, my man, you're hitting 346. Like it's, he's not, it's like he's hitting 200, but he just expects greatness from himself. And to be honest, that's why he is who he is, right? Because he expects, essentially hitting 350. And the pop in the bat is starting to wake up, especially as the weather gets a little warmer. That will continue. And yet he's still thinking about, man, I've left some on the table here and things like that. So that mental makeup is what makes him him, right? And that's, the baseball player that I think this, the fans of Louisville baseball and just kind of the U of L community around that, the athletic department, he's an easy kid to root for because of how much he wants it and the type of preparation that he puts in. So happy to see him, kind of start to break out a little bit and had a really good night. There were, you mentioned the cancer awareness game being, one of your favorites. And I always say there are 2 days for me that stick out on the calendar that are my favorite. The number one is not senior day, but graduation day. So the Saturday ahead, the last Saturday home game, that's always my favorite game. I just love to see the guys with, get their degrees and be recognized. I think it's a huge deal, especially for baseball players that aren't on full rides. They have to figure out their way through school a little bit differently than maybe a basketball or a football player might in terms of trying to pay for school and things like that. It's just a little bit different. And so just to see them get to the finish line there academically and get that's always my favorite day. Get their families out there and celebrate and take the picture with Coach Mack at home plate. I think that's my favorite. But outside of that, the cancer game is awesome, man. Cancer Awareness Night is special. The job that Coach Mack's wife Julie has done with that night and just making it what it is really special. And they honored her last night and just I think they over $150,000 raised for Gilda's club through with Julie, and that's pretty amazing. When you really think about it. I mean that I know it's a game that's very close to Their family's hard, as she had lost both her parents to different types of cancer, kind of right after they were married. So, yeah, the way that U of L has even done a little bit of a better job the last couple of years by adding the ribbons and the patches. And I mean, there are some kids with their own parents' initials on their jerseys. And so it's a special night, man. It's one of my favorites. And it was awesome to see them not only play good baseball, but play good baseball in front of a good crowd. It was good weather. And so just that made for a really good night. I think they auctioned off, a Coach Max signed cancer jersey, and then a bat signed by all the guys. So it was pretty awesome. Just a good night. One of my favorites, just like you. And so happy to see the guys come up with a good performance and a W on a night like that.
Yeah, it's always a good night to see, and the way that players, honor their different loved ones, and I also, the fans, their participation and, showing up, like you said, we talked about before, just the numbers, they continue to increase. And the fan support as this team continues to win, they're just going to keep showing up in droves. So hopefully that continues. So let's turn the page and look at Virginia Tech this weekend, Louisville's next conference opponent, which is going to be down in Blacksburg. And Terry, I know you're heading down and making the trip down to see the Cardinals take on the Hokies. So I'm excited to kind of see your thoughts on the stadium. I always love hearing people's thoughts after they get to see other ballparks and, kind of how they play and just visibility, viewing wise, what the park is like and the layout. So I'm excited to hear that when you get back next week. We'll talk about on the podcast, but just a little bit about Virginia Tech. They're currently 14-7. They're 2-4 in conference. They played 2 series. Unlike Louisville's played 1, they played 2 against Georgia Tech and NC State. They lost both those series 2-1. So they're desperately looking for a win. They're going to be hungry this weekend. I will say, when you talk about college basketball like we have a little bit, I think this is a good weekend for Louisville to be on the road, because we've talked about attendance also. This is a week that probably in the city of Louisville, attendance wouldn't be very high. Most people are going to be on their couches, or they're going to be somewhere watching basketball games. So I think this is a good weekend to be on the road. And hopefully Virginia Tech, their fans don't come out too loud and cheer against us, because I'd like to pick up a nice road win down there in Blacksburg. So when you kind of look over their team, Coach Chef, his teams are typically very offensive. We were talking before. I mean, they've had some dudes in the past. DeMartini comes to mind, just an absolute hitter. Just killed us time and time again over the past few years. Right now they're hitting .316 as a team. When you look at what Louisville's hitting .330. So, pretty similar ballpark to what Louisville's doing. One dude you got to watch out for on their roster is Sam Tackett. He's really leading the team in all offensive metrics. Batting average, he's hitting .464. It's kind of up in the Jake Monroe territory. Home runs, he's got 7. So you think Take Davis, RBIs, he's at 25. So, when you mesh, Louisville's best statistical hitters together into one, you get Sam Tackett. That's what he's doing. So he's a guy that can probably beat you by himself, and he's the one guy that you don't want to have to throw to in the lineup when the game's on the line. You're probably going to get Brett Renfro on Friday and Jake Marciano on Saturday. He's a freshman. Both those guys have sub-3 ERAs, which after 2 weekends of ACC baseball against Georgia Tech and NC State, that's pretty impressive to have those type of numbers. The one thing I noticed about those two guys when looking through their stats is they don't go far into games. I mean, 4 or 5 at the most, 6 innings is what they're getting out of them, but typically in the 5 range. I think they've both thrown around 24 innings in 5 starts or so. So they're not going deep into games whatsoever. So I think there's a big need for this team, Louisville team this weekend, to get to those two guys early and try to get the bullpen, because that's where Louisville's going to have a big advantage if you can get those two guys off the mound early in the baseball game on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, you mentioned DeMartini. Just to pile on, just happy. Couldn't be happier that he's off somewhere else doing, I'm assuming playing minor league baseball someplace. But yeah, happy for him to be gone. I do not want to watch him in the batter's box against Louisville anymore. Was a pretty complete hitter, so happy for him to be gone. Yeah, they're their front two guys, pitching wise, have been very good. Like you said, not guys that work deep into the game. So in terms of taking advantage of that, need to be able to either A, jump on them early, or B, work pitch counts and get them deep into, I think, last night Lucas Moore did a great job. First AB of the game of, I think it was double-digit pitches. And so, that type of approach this weekend down there would be huge, just to be able to, like you said, the advantage is in the later innings. Once they start to get to their bullpen, that's where you'll begin to see a little bit more trouble, just at least so far this year. Who knows? We may run into a buzzsaw this weekend. Baseball's a weird game like that, but at least of what you're seeing statistical wise so far, that's where the big advantage lies. And yeah, they do have some hitters, man. I mean, it's a team that traditionally puts up a lot of runs, and especially at home, they play very well at home. As far as going to the ballpark, I'm excited. I've had several people tell me it's their favorite ballpark to go to. I've never been to Blacksburg, but excited to go. But man, hopefully, the matchup on Friday, pitching wise, again, you have to feel real comfortable throwing Patrick Forbes, just, in terms of getting you off to a good start for the weekend. You're going to be in the game. I mean, even if he, again, just like this past weekend, the first three weekends, like we had talked about, or the first three innings were great. Lost the control a little bit, but I mean, you're still right in the baseball game. And so even when he doesn't have his best stuff, you're right there. And that's what makes me feel so comfortable about this team is, outside of one game, has there been one game all year where it just was kind of like we weren't really in the game? And to be honest, we were right in the game until, maybe the fourth inning, we kind of ran into some trouble and then it got away. But I mean, this team is not getting, no one's jumping on us early so far this year and just kind of putting it out of reach. And so taking this pitching and defense on the road, that is, again, he's got Coach Mack has a plethora of coach speak sayings that he likes to throw our way after games. But pitching and defense is one. And, they're coach speak sayings for a reason, right? Because they're the truth. And those things travel. And that's what makes you have to feel real comfortable with this club going on the road.
Yeah, I think when you just look, and I'll be honest, I haven't got to watch a ton of Virginia Tech play this year, but I've watched, obviously, enough Louisville to know that this team's going to go down there and battle. They've played a really good schedule up until this point, obviously. They've got 4 quad one wins. Obviously, this homestand has been really nice, but I'm excited to kind of see how they're going to respond to a little bit of adversity on the road. I don't know how many fans Virginia Tech's going to bring. We'll see that this weekend. But I think just having them play in a different environment as the opposing team, I think that's what I'm excited about, just to see how they respond to those moments. But I think you talked about Forbes a little bit. I see Friday night with Forbes and Renfroe on the mound for Virginia Tech being a very similar game like what we saw this past Sunday with Peter Michael and Aiden Hawk on the mound. I think we could see, those two starting pitchers go, 6-7 innings, giving up maybe a run or so apiece, and the bullpen is going to have to be the deciding factor in the game. And I think if that's the case, from what we've seen so far, advantage Louisville. So that's going to play in our favor. Hopefully that's end up how it works out. But just looking through the two teams, I really like our chances down there. And I hope we come back with a series win and just keep this thing rolling. I'm really excited about where we are at this point in the season. I don't think we've talked about this before, but if you tell me 20 games in that we're 17-3, I don't bat an eye at that. Yes, 100% I'll take that with the schedule that we knew they were going to play. So excited to see them take this thing on the road and try to take a couple of victories from Coach Chef and his club down there. Which every time I look at his name, Chef, it's spelled Szefc. For those that don't know, but pronounced Chef. Him and I have to be related somewhere down the line, right? Like Every time I see his name, I'm like, hey, dude, somehow we're distant cousins or something from a couple hundred years ago.
It's just the way you never know how names get passed through and how people adjust them. And yeah, you guys could have, you might have some distant relatives that, who knows, lived in the same community or something like that for sure.
All right, Terry. Well, before we wrap this thing up and you head down to Blacksburg tomorrow to take on 3 games from the Hokies, any final thoughts or anything you'd like to add before we kind of wrap this up and hit this thing on the road?
And just, again, I talked about just briefly last week, but been excited that high school baseball is back as well. So I got out on Monday to see a couple commits. So going to see another one tomorrow. So just I'm excited to have high school baseball, back on the diamond and be able to, especially for all the commits from Kentucky, especially if they're, now I know you can only commit as a, rising junior or senior year, but still there's a younger kid or two out there, some stragglers from previous rules, but trying to get out and see everybody. So I've been excited. Trinity looked real good and got to see Nolan Hosking and Zach Floyd, a couple 26s on Monday, and they looked good. So saw Coach Vrabel out there as well. So he's always making the rounds, and so it's good. I'm happy to have it back and happy to have to be out there and see some of these kids before they get to campus. But yeah, just excited for this weekend, man. Can't wait to get to Blacksburg. And I've heard good things. Like I said, everyone, says really good things about the ballpark. And I always like to get out and explore the campus and stuff as well. So I'm excited. Thank goodness it's not too far. It's just like 6 hours, 5.5, 6 hours. So nothing too terrible. So I'm excited for it.
Well, and as always, we appreciate your high school updates because I know it can be a challenge for everybody to get out there and see those guys. I know they appreciate it, but I think as from the fan standpoint, we get to see a little bit of what's going to be at 3rd and Central over the next couple of years. So it's good to see and your updates and videos and all that good stuff. So before we close this thing out, kind of plug that. Let everybody know where they can find you so they can keep along with your updates and what's going on with high school recruiting, but also what's going on with Louisville baseball because you do a very good job posting videos and press conferences and all that good stuff on your Twitter feed as well.
Yeah, you can find me at Inside Louisville Baseball on YouTube. Any type of post-game interview I do with Coach Mack and things like that, I always toss up on there. And then as far as following me on Twitter, it's InsideVille BSB. Just anything I can put together for, at a high school game. I try to record all at bats or if a pitcher's pitching, make sure I get, try to get a good pitch mix and get some strikeouts and things like that. And piece some videos together. And yeah, people seem to like them. The high school stuff tends to do pretty well. I think people like either seeing what's next or seeing themselves or seeing their kids on there. So, it was good. It was good first week, but yeah, Inside Louisville Baseball on YouTube or InsideVille BSB on Twitter.
Well, keep doing your thing over there. We appreciate the updates. You can find us obviously on Twitter at 3rd Central Pod. You can find me at Matt Sefcovic. One final note I'll make, we've got after this weekend at Virginia Tech, we do stay on the road next Tuesday at Cincinnati. So we will be back next week to cover the Cal series and wrap up this 4-game road stand that seems like we haven't played on the road in a long, long time. So here we are. We've got 4 in a row. Hopefully we can pick up a couple big victories and come back next week and recap a couple wins as we head into another homestand at Jim Patterson Stadium. But until then, in the words of Sean Moth, we'll see you at the ballpark.